Hello. All right. Uh, okay. Welcome to our fourth lecture. I lost count of how many lectures we have this semester, but we're having the honor of having a great speaker today. I'm gonna ask or let my colleague Elisa introduce him. Thank you for being here. It's been a busy schedule with lectures and guests and activities this semester, and it's only the beginning, so get ready for more because we're not stopping. And this is the semester when we have the super jury and career fair and all those great activities. Because you're not here to hear me talk, I'm going to pass it to Elisa as quick as possible. Thank you, Rebecca, Sean, and everybody for joining us today.
Thank you, Henry. I am very moved and excited, first of all, to have a new friend that is Shamichael Hallman, and have enjoyed tremendously all of our conversations, all of our explorations, our exchanges with students last semester while we were exploring libraries in D5. And I wanted the entire community to have an opportunity to get to know and listen to Shamichael as well. I first met him last year. He was a Loeb Fellow at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design. And I think it was just an amazing sort of recognition and acknowledgement of the value of his work in the built environment from a social perspective, and how needed that kind of an angle of inquiry is, given like the gross social injustices that are not just present but even sort of becoming escalated. And so I'll just do a brief brush through of his accolades and accomplishments, and then pass it over to him. So he's right now the Director of Civic Health and Economic Opportunity with the Urban Libraries Council, which the Miami-Dade Library System is a member of. In this role, he's working to create this council's upcoming focus on libraries as many things, more than a place with books, but as valuable physical space that is public, connectors of diverse lived experiences, and is also specifically their relationship with public health and public safety. As I mentioned, he was a Loeb Fellow last year, and between 2017 and 2022, he was a senior library manager of a library in the Memphis public library system called Cosset Library, with a very problematic historic baggage to it, having been a segregated library. And then using this process of rethinking the library to kind of also heal, overcome, learn from that history, grow together. And the experience of kind of bringing some funds together to rethink the library and mix up a bit of the expectations that we have about libraries was the reason it received in 2021 the National Medal for Museum and Library Science by the Institute of Museums and Library Services, and was also recognized as the nation's most innovative public library by the Smithsonian Magazine. He has a 2020 TED Talk that I absolutely encourage you guys to listen to, Rethinking the Public Library to Reconnect the Communities, reconnect the community, and which has like, I don't know, many thousands or millions of views. And he's also a founding member of Libraries as Bridges, a grassroots collective of libraries seeking to understand the role of the public library and what it can serve as a cultivating and enhancing role for civic and social life of communities. He's also working on a book that explores libraries as sites of encounters and seeks to demonstrate the public library's unique role in generating opportunities for shared experience among people of all incomes and backgrounds. And that's something that Eric Olin Wright puts front and center in his writings, reflecting on spaces in our cities that are not monetized. And as non-monetized spaces, they really are bastions of what democracy in space looks like. You don't get a book because you can pay more for it. You get a book because you have access to it, and if somebody else is on the waiting list before you, you wait until your turn. And that access to space for activities, for dancing, for meeting friends, for having meetings that have to do maybe with your own building your CV and encountering folks for a job interview. But also just this very valuable institution that we've had for over a century, since the Carnegie family started the whole library as an institution in the United States. And so from that, to reflect on society at large, from something that we actually are all invited to participate in, that as engaged citizens, as engaged students, you yourself can come to your local library and say, I would like to have a conversation about the Everglades. I'd like to have a conversation about dance. I'd like to share my knowledge of chess playing. We don't actually understand that libraries are there with that degree of openness. And so I want to just allow you now to listen to Shamichael. Fernando, good to see you. And thank you and welcome to this community that I totally feel you're like a part of now. So come on up. Yeah. You're right up.
All right. Everybody hear me okay? All right, great. Well, it is truly an honor to be in front of you today, to share a little bit about the public library. I want to thank Dean Schreiner and Henry and Lisa so much for the invitation to talk about reimagining the neighborhood library. Let's see here. Do we have, looks like my clicker may not be working. Can we just go? Can just advance that way, maybe? Okay, cool. There we go, cool. And so we think about this word, reimagine, to imagine again, to anew. I love this sort of way of thinking about the public library because it reminds me that, yes, the public library is in a space that is ripe for innovation, that is ripe for change. But it also serves as a reminder to know that the public library as an institution has always been evolving. That from the inception to now, the public library has found ways to meet the needs of the community, whatever those needs might be. And throughout history, many folks have had things to say about the public library. Many influential, many important people, many historical figures have reflected and thought about the significance of the library. This is one quote from FDR that says, "Libraries are directly and immediately involved in the conflict which divides our world, and for two reasons. First, because they are essential to the functioning of a democratic society. Second, because the contemporary conflict touches the integrity of scholarship, the freedom of the mind, and even the survival of culture. And libraries are the great tools of scholarship, the great repositories of culture, and the great symbols of the freedom of the mind." I think it's interesting to think about this quote, and to not only think about this quote coming from someone of that nature. Over the last 8 years, I've been able to work with and for and around public libraries, and I think some of the greatest testimonies that I have heard have not come from influential folks, have not come even from library staff, but have come from the everyday users that frequent those locations. Those people will tell you that for them, the public library is the place where they go and get the novel that is from their favorite author, right? They would tell you that the public library is the place where they go after school to connect with friends, to hang out until their parents get off of work. They would tell you that the public library is the place that they go to do a thing that they love, to sew, to knit, to code, to create a podcast. And to do that with people who were once strangers but have now become friends. Those people would tell you the public library is the place where they go to get out of the elements, to go to a place where they have some level of dignity. And it reminds me, as I think about all of these quotes and all of these stories from big library systems in major cities to the smallest towns in America. And I've come away with sort of the thought that the public library as an institution is perhaps the greatest indoor public asset that we have in this country. There are a lot of things that are affecting public libraries right now. There are a number of things that are happening in society that which libraries are having to respond to. We think about the maker movement, right? That you have people who are in their homes, in their basements, creating things. Jewelry, T-shirts, sweatshirts. They're tinkering around with things. And sometimes they don't have access to the best of resources to make those things. Cost prohibitive, right? And so what we see is that now public libraries are entering a space where they are creating maker spaces, where there are lots of pieces of equipment and software and hardware that are freely available and accessible to people to be able to create at their heart's desire. We can think about virtual reality, and it's very interesting now that I remember as a kid going to the library to pick up the encyclopedia. That is a thing, right? It was a thing, right? To sort of learn about the world, to learn about airplanes and learn about Africa and learn about bombers and learn about all of these things. But now we're in a space where kids can not only go to the library and pick up a book about a foreign country, they can put on a headset and be transported to that country, right? And it just does a really amazing thing. So the library is sort of responding to these things. And lots of really interesting things are sort of happening here at this intersection, where we think about the sharing economy, we think about artificial intelligence, we think about experiential retail. In my job, I work now for an organization called the Urban Libraries Council. We are an association and an innovation tank of the nation's, really North America's largest public library systems. And I'm thinking about sort of two spaces within public libraries. One is around economic opportunity, and just sort of thinking about what are the many ways the library is responding to helping people who are entrepreneurs, who are trying to upskill themselves. And it's been fascinating to see some of the examples that have sort of come about. One that I recently saw here is in Los Angeles Public Library. They created a street vendor program that is absolutely amazing, where people can come off the street really with no experience at all, just an idea. Like, man, I think I want to do this thing. I've been cooking this stuff out of my house for a long time. Maybe I should get a food truck. Maybe I should try a commercial kitchen. And they're equipping individuals with the skills they need, how to incorporate their business, how to go after their first loan, where to find the best customers. It's really interesting. Another program is here. This is in the San Diego Public Library. This is really fascinating that they figured out that teens and young folks could be some of their best influencers. And so they created a program by which they taught these teens how to create films, how to create short films, and then pay them to go into each of the individual neighborhood libraries and spend time there and actually create films about the ways that people were using those libraries. It's this very fascinating space there. And all this was created by the library. This library staff made these things happen, right? And so when we think about the library as a place, as a repository of books, as a quiet space, yes, it is those things. But the public library is becoming so much more than that. I told you that the other thing that I'm sort of really interested in right now is this idea of civic health. And there are two things that are sort of happening here as we think about civic health. The first is that we are becoming a socially isolated society, right? Many of you probably have seen this loneliness report that was published by the Surgeon General's office last year. And we see rates of social connection are dropping across the board. People are engaging less with their friends. less with their family, and less with others, for a whole host of reasons. But the interesting thing is this. One of the most probably striking things in the entire report that says the lack of social connection poses a significant risk for individual health and longevity. Loneliness and social isolation increase the risk for premature death by 26 and 29% respectively. More broadly, lacking social connection can increase the risk for premature death as much as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. In addition, poor and insufficient social connections associated with the increases in heart disease and stroke. This is happening across our country right now. And as we think about social connection, I've sort of dove into this, and it's really fascinating to think about what makes up social connection, right? And within the report, we see that there are three things that are happening that sort of contribute to how well someone might be socially connected. The first component is a structural component. This is sort of the definition of your relationships, right? Whether you are married, whether you have a parent, whether you have strong colleagues, right? The second area is sort of function. What degree do these relationships serve you? Do they give you some level of emotional support, social support? In times of crisis, can you lean on these people for financial support? And then lastly, there's a component of quality, meaning do these relationships bring you a great level of satisfaction, or do they bring a great level of strain? And what is coming out of the report is that people are lacking in all three of these, that the structure and the function are not there, and because the structure and function are not there, the quality of them, of course, is suffering. And I think libraries play a very, very interesting role here, which I'll come back to in a moment. We'll get there in a moment. But I think there's three other things that we ought to know as we think about social connection and social disconnection. And within social disconnection, there are sort of three ways of looking at this, because I think sometimes we just think solely about loneliness, right? But there's a little bit more that's happening there. The first thing that's happening there is what is known as objective isolation. This is known as social isolation. This is defined as having few social relationships, group memberships, or infrequent social interactions. Social isolation can occur at various levels, ranging from physical isolation to emotional, psychological withdrawal. The second element is subjective isolation. This is actually loneliness, right? Formal definitions of loneliness vary, but typically share two common elements. There is an emotional component, where you actually feel unwelcomed, right? And then there's a social cognition component where there's a perception of being or feeling disconnected, right? And then there's this third element that I think is very, very important. It is social negativity. This is poor social interaction. This is actually the presence of harmful interactions. And this is very, very important because I think that as we think about what is it like to create spaces that draw in diverse people, that as we seek to create opportunities that can achieve social-economic mixing, how do we do this in a way that takes into account marginalized folks? How do we do this in an account that takes into account power dynamics? Because the last thing we want to do is create opportunities for people to get together and it actually do more harm than good. As we think about this then, I think not only do we sort of have this issue of social isolation happening, we also have this other dynamic of political polarization happening, right? Two very interesting stats here. The share of Americans who say having political conversations with those they disagree with is stressful and frustrating, right? A 2021 report from Pew Research showed that nearly 6 in 10 U.S. adults say they find these conversations stressful, up from 50% in 2019. Additionally, the Pew Research Center reports that Republicans and Democrats view not just the opposing party, but also the people in that party in a negative light. Growing shares in each party now describe those in the other party as more closed-minded, dishonest, immoral, and even unintelligent than other Americans. So we have these two interesting things that are happening. In addition to all the other sort of factors that I showed you around makerspace and around the sharing economy, we have these things of social isolation and political polarization that are directly affecting the spaces that we create. So what are we to do about that? Once again, an opportunity to imagine anew. There's a wonderful book that I found while I was at Harvard called The Companion to Public Space. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it before, but if you haven't, you should absolutely go to the library today and find this book. A quote in that book says this: "Envisioning futures is a core role of urban composition. Built forms have frequently endured long past their initial purposes, builders and even civilizations. And our built compositions will be transformed by continuing urbanization, aging populations, migrations, and other consequences of climate change, automation, and the continued evolution of virtual worlds, and other emerging and unseen trends. Understanding how these forces may reshape public space is critical to recomposing spaces that will serve us well during their long lives. Public spaces can be key components in tempering and adapting to these trends. If our squares, streets, parks, and other public spaces effectively foster the formation of social capital, encourage physical health, engender a sense of belonging and stability, host peaceful political speech and protest, and provide a sense of conviviality." In light of the social isolation and the political polarization, two solutions have been offered. One is social infrastructure. Eric Klinenberg coined this in his book, Palaces for the People, refers to the programs such as volunteer organizations, sports groups, religious groups, member organizations, policies, public transportation, housing, education, and physical elements of a community such as libraries, parks, green spaces, and playgrounds that support the development of a social connection. So we have here again programs, policies, physical elements, right? And in light of the sort of civil unrest, in light of the polarization, this concept actually particularly came up around the pandemic of civic infrastructure. And they say here, this is the indispensable community-based places, people, institutions, media, and funding, which is, I think it's interesting that this is added to that definition, to build social cohesion, promote civic renewal, and advance the ideals of a healthy democracy in the 21st century. We've got two different infrastructures that are trying to achieve similar things. And I think that the public library actually floats the line between both of these. And in fact, the public library is a sort of place-based hybrid infrastructure that is achieving many of these outcomes. One more thing that I want to show you before I talk about the work in Memphis. As we think about social isolation, as we think about loneliness, how do we sort of begin to combat that? Well, one of the things that we can do is that we can foster belonging. One of the very interesting things that I came across in my study for my book is this new integrative framework for belonging that says that if you want to foster belonging, essentially four things that have to happen. One, that there actually has to be opportunities to belong. There have to be spaces for me to show up. There has to be a park. There has to be a library. There has to be a square. There has to be a street. There has to be some space for me to actually show up, right? Which is important. But that's not enough. I then actually have to have motivations to actually want to go to these places, right? There has to be something that's drawing me. There has to be some personal motivation of, hey, I should probably get out of the house. I should probably get out of my apartment and go hang out with somebody, right? But there should also be something that is drawing me there. There should be something of beauty, something of interest, something of curiosity that is saying, hey, you should go check out this really cool space that is across the street or down the block. Right? So you got to have motivations. You got to have opportunities. And this is actually very, very interesting. This third one is you have to have this competence. You have to have the skills to belong. Right? Because when you go out in public, you are in public. And you are going to come across all sorts of people who might look different than you, who might think different than you, who might move and navigate the world very differently than you. And that takes a certain level of tolerance and empathy and humility, right? To be able to say, maybe my way isn't the only way. Maybe the way I approach things isn't the only way to think about these things, right? And those three things together affect your perception of how well you actually belong. And so as you are going about creating spaces, as you are going about creating buildings, as you're going about creating, hopefully, the new generation of libraries, I hope you will think about, how might my space, how might the things that I am looking to create actually help foster a sense of belonging? Our society is dying for it. They literally are dying for it, which makes the impact of the work that you all are doing and will be doing even more important. I had one last thing here that as we think about, not only are we trying to foster belonging, we are also trying to cultivate civic health. Last definition that I'll share with you, and this is, pull this from the Civic Health Project, as they have tried to conceptualize what do we mean by civic health. And they say that civic health is essentially the ways in which residents of a community or state participate in activities that strengthen well-being, enhance interconnections, build trust, help each other, talk about public issues and challenges, volunteer in government and nonprofit organizations, stay informed about their communities, and participate directly in crafting solutions to various social and economic challenges. And so as you are thinking about not only what does my building, what does my space look like, I do hope that you would also begin to ask yourself, what can it achieve? I think the real magic is there. How might we create spaces that bring people together? How might we create spaces that foster a sense of belonging? How might we create spaces that allow people and facilitate people to be able to come together and have conversations about sexuality, about gender, about politics in a way that they can move things forward? I did have the pleasure for 7 years to work with the Memphis Public Library System. We did some really, really incredible work there, and our work was recognized in many different ways. This was a Smithsonian this was like, so you know, like in black households, you kind of hope that one day your face might be like on Ebony magazine. So my face didn't make it on Ebony magazine, but I got on Smithsonian magazine. So my mom has this on the coffee table, and she don't let nothing happen to that magazine, so that was like my moment. But it really wasn't about me. It was about the other people you see in that picture. It was a team of people who were dedicated folks who made sure that we were able to take a space, several spaces across the city of Memphis, and transform them, so much so that the magazine graciously dubbed us the most innovative public library in the nation. Here's what we did. We focused on a number of core components. This is just a few of those. I certainly don't have time to talk about all of them. But we knew that with the design, that we had to create a welcome. And particularly, we had to create a welcome that would invite all of Memphis. Couldn't have a space where there were just some people who could show up, or some people who felt comfortable showing up, but we had to create a space in which all people showed up. We'll talk about what that looked like. And part of that, in order to get to that space, is we had to think about our outreach. That we had to go to places, and we had to go find people who didn't normally come in the library, who didn't know about the resources that we had. We had to create a set of programming, a sort of diversity of programming that could attract people, and we had to partner with people in the community to make it happen. So establishing the welcome. A couple of foundations that were here in terms of establishing this welcome. A couple of foundations. The first foundation is that we had to extend a welcome to all, from the most affluent to the most vulnerable, to people from across the spectrum of political ideologies. This required intentional staffing, outreach, high-quality design, right? All of this played a role here, but this was very, very important for us to, in fact, what we did, so I'll tell you a little bit about the building. Cosset Library was the first public library that was built in Memphis. It is in the heart of downtown Memphis. It has an unobstructed view of the Mississippi River. It is one of the most beautiful spaces that you will see if you're ever in downtown Memphis. the building opens up in the spring of 1895. And for the first 65 years, black people had no access. It was a bustling branch, lots of things that were happening here, research and book exchange and knowledge exchange. Black people had no access to this branch. There was actually a branch down the street, a mile down the street, that was known as the Negro branch. And that branch got the inferior resources, the hand-me-down resources, the discarded books. And for 65 years, that was the standard. What happens is in 1957, a gentleman by the name of Jesse Turner files a lawsuit, says, hey, you have to give us access to this building. And the lawsuit goes nowhere, just sits there for 3 years. In the spring of 1960, a brave group of black college students decide to do sit-ins at public spaces in Memphis. They say, we will not leave until you give us access. Those folks are arrested and thrown in jail. Many of them lost scholarships and their livelihoods. But that moment, that very, very brave moment, led to the desegregation of all public space in Memphis. And this library was the site of this. And so we'll talk a little bit about this, but I say that to say that every space that you go to has some history. And it's important to do the research and understand that history. Because there may be some people who have tried to create a new narrative of that neighborhood and put the marker here at 2010 or 2015 when we moved in, when in reality, that history goes back much further, right? And so it's important for you to have conversations with many people in that community to get a full understanding of what's actually happened. Back to the foundation. Number 2, we had to create a flexible space that was able to serve multiple purposes. When civic spaces are versatile by design, they open up a whole host of programming options. Number 3, we had to encourage active participation from the community through acts of co-creation. If you hear nothing else from this point forward, the most important thing that we did in that location was invited the community to program and create alongside us. It was not us that had the answers. It was not us that had the solutions. We knew that if we talked to enough people in that community, enough times, that we get what we needed. And then lastly, we wanted to create opportunities for shared experiences. Because whether it is isolation or polarization, something funny happens when two people from different walks of life sit down and start sewing together. Because the first time they might not talk to each other. The second time they might notice each other. The third time they might strike up a conversation and say, hey, I noticed you've been coming to the same thing that I've been coming to every week. What's your name? The fourth time they meet, they're exchanging stories about kids. The fifth time they meet, they've linked up and they're doing something outside of the library. I've seen this happen time and time. I'm not telling you something that I'm guessing. I've seen this happen. Shared experiences are powerful. And we have to have spaces that allow for many different opportunities to happen. So we worked with a Groundswell Design Group in Pickering, architects in Memphis, and the redesign branch had a couple things going on here. First, we opened up the courtyard prior to the renovation, and I'm sorry I didn't have a picture of before. This was just all green space. It was all green space, not much happening here. So what's happened in this new image is that half of the green space has been paved. We've added a ton of seating there, and then you also will see we have steps that are bringing you into the courtyard. And this is very, very important because prior to the steps, you had to sort of walk down to either end of the block to get to the library. And that caused many people to just walk right by and never actually come in. But these steps played a very, very pivotal role in inviting people down. And then lastly, on the outside here, we've added these lights that, particularly at night, just lighten up the space and catch your attention as you're driving by. On the inside, we decided that it was very important that we paid tribute to the sit-ins that I told you all about. And so we did two things. We, number one, pulled this as kind of a pixelated image of the trial. Actually, 6 African-American lawyers tried the case that led to the desegregation. And so we wanted to make sure that we paid honor to those folks. But then through the community engagement work, we actually went and found the names of every student that was arrested Every one of them. Anyone who got arrested, we poured through arrest records, and we have listed their name in the library now. That is a part of the history of that library, that we would not be doing any of this stuff if those folks had not have said, I'm willing to be arrested for this space to be accessible to everybody. And so we paid tribute to that. And I know many of you are thinking about, how do we celebrate the local culture of the spaces that we're in? I want to encourage you to continue to be thinking about that and find many, many ways to lift up the history of a space. I can tell you that I remember the day that we did the public dedication, and there were a few people who were still living. And they came in and they brought their children, and they brought their grandchildren. Look, baby, that's my name right there. That's my name right there, right? And the level of pride that their children and their grandchildren saw. Those people will never forget about that library. Just that simple act, that simple installation has engendered a new generation of people to love this library simply because we were careful and thoughtful in paying tribute to what had happened there. So when you come in, you see a very large 15 feet by 70 feet wide, long mural. That is absolutely amazing. We added a cafe. And this is quite interesting for a number of reasons, because we recognized that, number one, adding a cafe meant that the library was all of a sudden going to become a noisy space. And there would no longer be you have to talk like this because you're in the library. And we had to contend with that because there were some people who were very excited about this. Oh, I can talk in the library now? I can yell across, hey man, what's up, dog? And there's some people that's like, hey man, I'm trying to study, right? But the design was done in such a way where both could actually happen, where there was a space where you could walk in and you could have a lively conversation, and then there were other spaces where you could go and study. And I think this is probably where many, many libraries will continue to go, right? The cafe, again, through community engagement, has a really interesting story. The person who's running this cafe now, his name is Eli Townsend. Eli grew up in one of the more poor sections of Memphis. And Eli tells a story that when he was 10 years old, that he vividly remembers the bookmobile coming through his community. And it would stop at a certain place in his community and pass out books. He said the problem was that by the time the bookmobile got to his community, the only books that were left were, you might guess it, cookbooks. And that was his journey into becoming a chef. It took us a long time to find Eli. We had no idea he was out there. It was just a lot of engagement. It was a lot of walk in the community. But now Eli is running this space, and he has a variety of menu options, actually seasonally. So every season he changes over his menu based off of what's available. And this got us to think, this is interesting. What if every time he changes his menu, we also change our collection? So that even if you come in the library in February and get a particular book and get a particular sandwich, that if you come back in August, it's going to be a different sandwich and a different book. Sort of creates a sort of FOMO of like, oh, I need to go back to that place and see what's there. It's not that we've done away with any of the books. It's just a different way of us circulating the books and displaying the books that creates the set of, oh, there's something new that's happening in this space. And that, I think, also will be something that you will see as a continuing trend in the library space. We added a performance area, about 2,500 square feet. And this was very, very important for three reasons. In our community engagement efforts, we talked to about 100 artists and arts organizations in the city. Memphis is a town of music. It is a town of soul. It's a town of jazz, a town of rock and roll. There's so much really vibrancy that's happening there, and we thought, hey, we should probably talk to these people. And these individuals, actually, and this individual here, this in the picture here, his name is Lil Buck. Lil Buck grew up learning ballet. He's a trained ballet dancer, but he also loved hip-hop. And so Lil Buck decided that he might fuse the two, ballet and hip-hop, and create something that he calls jukin, Memphis jukin. And what started with one person is now a global phenomenon. If you YouTube Memphis jukin, you will see people really in every part of the world that are jukin. Anyway, as we were having these conversations with these artists and these arts organizations, three things emerged. They said that they were starving for space. They were starving for space to be able to rehearse. They were starving for space to be able to perform. That there was a lack of spaces in Memphis to be able to do those things. But they said they needed three things to actually be in place for them to have a space. Number one, they needed for it to be affordable, right? That if the cost was so expensive, that essentially they would have to pass that cost on to the patrons, thereby limiting who could actually get access to the arts. So it had to be affordable first. The second thing is it had to actually be accessible. There's some buildings that were just because when they were built, you just can't get in them, right? If you're in a wheelchair, if you're disabled, like you're just differently able, you just can't get in the space. And then thirdly, they had to be inclusive. And this was important because what some people told us, particularly a black-led founder, said, hey, sometimes when we rent out spaces and we walk in these spaces, the people in those spaces lock everything up. Oh, here come the black people. Let's lock up the speakers and stuff, right? And so they said, hey, we need spaces that are affordable, accessible, and inclusive. And there aren't a lot of spaces. So we specifically designed this space so that those individuals could use this space. In this way, we said the library doesn't have to do it all. Library staff doesn't have to do everything, that we can instead be host and just have a beautiful space that the community could use. And in doing that, I will tell you that, so Lil Buck, actually, he was the first person, and out of the library, he now operates the Memphis Jukin Academy of Arts. And each week he does all sorts of classes, hip-hop classes, dance classes to kids and adults, right? But he's just one of many folks who are now using this space. And we charge them nothing to use this space. What we have said instead is that the library should not be a place of transaction where you come and get something and you leave. The library should be a place of relationship. And so every person that gets this space for free is in exchange doing some sort of program that is free to the community, right? And it's a beautiful model that really works. Lastly, we added 2 studio spaces. There is one audio side that you can that you have access to pretty much anything you need to be able to record. If you need a musical instrument, you've got it. If you need a laptop with creative software, you've got it. If you need a headphone, you've got it, right? And we have a video side that will allow you to do all sorts of video projects. So if you're creating a TikTok video, if you're creating a YouTube documentary, again, everything you need to be able to do, whether you need a green screen, a HD camera, your library card gets you access to that. And in this way, we sort of opened up the space so that no matter what side of town you are on, no matter what socioeconomic class you stand in, if you can make it to this space, you've got access to it. You don't have to pay a dime for the Adobe Creative Cloud. You don't have to pay a dime for the acoustic guitar that's in the corner. You don't have to pay a dime for the professional-grade podcasting equipment. You just reserve it. So when I go back and say that I believe that the public library, as it's evolving, was one of the nation's greatest indoor assets, that's what I mean. A few more things as I wrap up. This is now the outside space here. You can see, once again, that how half the space has been paved. We've got planters that go along the street, again, do a wonderful job of capturing your imagination. There is a piece of public art here. This is a wonderful piece of art. This is actually Tennessee. The mockingbird is our state bird. And so what you see here is a mockingbird coming out of a book. And its wings are the pages of the book. And on its wings, which you can't see from here, but on its wings are quotes from kids about why they love the public library. This was a part of our outreach. We had sort of these coloring pages, and we asked kids to tell us, what's your favorite story of the library? What's your favorite book in the library? Why do you love coming to the library so much? And all of their thoughts went on the wings of the bird, and it made for a very, very beautiful installation. This is what the space looks like when all of the chairs and tables are out. It creates, again, just a welcome that people who would not have come in the building before, who are now showing up. We have extended the Wi-Fi well into the courtyard, so it's possible for you to come and just hang out in the courtyard and never make your way into the library. But once you hit the library's Wi-Fi, it gives you access to certain books, right? So it's just there for you. This is the inside. Here's the mural, so you can see it there. Actually, in the middle, these are the lawyers who tried the case. This is what the building looked like in its original form, and this is what it looks like now. And so essentially what we have here is a sort of progression of the space, and our gratitude to these folks for helping us get to that space. You can see also the floor, for the most part, is just cement floor. We put carpet in a couple of areas, but with food and beverages going around, we needed spaces that could easily be cleaned. But I think there's also things that you see here, very, very expensive chairs. And there were some people who actually got mad at us when they saw the quality of the furniture that we were putting in the space, because we do, as most urban downtown libraries are, we have a significant portion of unhoused individuals. And there were a number of folks in the community who thought that those individuals didn't deserve that level of beauty. One more picture of the inside there. You can see the cafe space, some of the tables and chairs, some of the seating arrangements as the building was going up. Second floor space, again, very open, right? Very open, very vibrant. We can very quickly be able to adjust and adapt these spaces depending on what sort of event is happening in the space. We've talked very quickly about sort of, how do we went about attracting audiences. We did a lot both inside and outside to go and find individuals. We did a human chess tournament that was pretty cool. Let's see here. We allowed other individuals to come into the space here. It's a law school not too far away. This was kind of our idea of thinking about what it might look like to play host, right? To have other people come and use the space, and that was very cool. We went out into the community. This was during COVID. We were in parks doing all sorts of activities with parents. Our engagement efforts, we brought lots of people in. As the space was being built, before the space as it was being renovated, before it was being renovated, we brought in lots of people to give their thoughts and ideas about what this space could be. We brought in teens, we brought in adults, we went to farmers markets, we went to parks. And I would say lastly, we recognized that our partnerships were very, very important. So here was kind of our asset map. We were thinking about individuals, everything from our individual staff to people directly in the community, to cultural groups in churches, to institutions. And all of these folks we talked to, everybody in this radius we talked to and asked them their thoughts. And it worked out that it helped us get a space that was much more robust to meet the needs of the community. Here's essentially the kind of partnership matrix that we used here a lot as we were going to talk about people that we might want to partner with, whether that was an after-school program, college or university. We sort of kind of asked ourselves, how does this line up? And this sort of matrix here was very, very important for us. And we ended up working with some really cool people. I'll share one thing with you that was really interesting that we're still working on. During one of our outreach events, this was happening kind of in the winter time, right around the holidays, we started talking to makers, started talking to people who were making soaps and jewelry and stuff. And we found out that a lot of these folks didn't have a website. They were essentially selling their products via Facebook or Instagram, right? And we said, well, hey, do you want a website? And people said, well, yeah, it would be great to have a website, but we don't have the technical expertise to be able to do it. We don't have the money to hire somebody, right? And I think I've shared this with some of you all, that what we ended up doing was two things. We because of this sort of mutual aid model that we had sort of baked into the library, we found a group of folks who were technologists who worked for a major employer that was just a few blocks from us. And we said, hey, y'all, we found like 50 folks who make really, really amazing things in this city and they don't have a website. Would you be willing to help them out? And they said, yeah, of course we'd be willing to help them out. And then we went and talked to this company, Automatic. They're based in San Francisco, and they make this product called WooCommerce. I'm not sure if you are a WordPress user. WooCommerce is an extension that sits on top of that allows you to have an e-commerce platform that handles everything for you. It handles shipping, taxes, inventory. And we called Automatic and we said, hey, we have this we have these entrepreneurs in Memphis who don't have a website, and we know that you all have this flagship software. Would you be willing to give us a discount on your software? And they said, we'll do you better than giving you a discount. We'll give it to you for free. So they gave us 50 licenses to be able to help these folks. And now what is happening in the library context is that individuals who didn't have a website, individuals who are technologists, are coming together to create a website for these folks at no cost to them, right? These are some of the things that are happening in libraries across the country. This is not unique to Memphis. This is happening in Boston, in Phoenix, in Miami. This is happening, right? And so as you think about the future of where you might go, I hope that you will be thinking about how might the work that we do inspire and lead people to create spaces like this. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Shamichael. Would be fantastic if anybody had any comments or questions, maybe for another 15 minutes or so, yeah? So, Sean, I see you about to.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm curious about two things. What was the cost for the renovation, and was the library offline during that process, and for how long? Beyond that, I'm just curious about downtown Memphis. I don't know it well, and just what's been the landscape post-COVID as a lot of downtown areas are being, revitalized. Memphis was probably a place that a lot of people went to get away from the big cities, so to speak. Right. And so I'm wondering if the library is working against what I perceive to be a likely gentrification that's happening in downtown, or staving that off in some ways.
Yeah, so the work that we did at the library was actually a part of a larger initiative or Reimagine the Civic Commons that is actually playing out in, I think, 12 cities now across the U.S. And in Memphis, it was not just the library. There were also two parks. One of them, Tom Lee Park, if you Google it, you'll see it's just a really amazing transformation there. And so this was essentially a set of connected assets that we're trying to achieve a set of goals together, right? And so we were not operating in isolation. So a lot of those partnerships that I talk about was happening with parks and those sorts of things. The inside of the building was closed during renovation. Fortunately, we still had access to the courtyard, both front and back courtyard. And so we thought it was important for us to continue the program. So we did outdoor concert series, we did outdoor festivals. On the back courtyard has a really beautiful view of the river, and so we did this thing called Riverfront Storytime. We pulled all the books about the river, and we invited kids to come and sort of learn about the ecology of the river, the insects and animals and arts and crafts around it and that sort of thing. So But I will say one thing and tell me your name, sir? Sean. Okay, Sean. So Sean, one thing that did happen, and I think this probably was the most important thing, was because the library closed, library leadership said, hey, normally when a library like that closes, staff will be reassigned to another branch. And our leadership said, no, y'all stay here and figure it out. And so we had to find pop-ups. Like we had to pop up in food halls, in businesses, at the park when it was warm enough and the elements allowed it. And I think that was the key, because that put us in front of people that we just otherwise probably would not have seen. In terms of the total cost of the project, it was a little over $6 million. That funding came from local dollars. It came from some philanthropic dollars, but mainly local dollars and some tax structures that were set up around tourism. So, yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
So you said that there was a lot of input from or at least what I gathered, there's a lot of input from the community as well as members of like the library association. How did you gather collect and manage all them, and how did you get people to actually provide their input?
Well, it was because of what the question Sean asked, I think, that, as we were in these different areas, it was just sort of a natural conversation, right? But we did use electronic, capturing. And for the most part, we asked about 4 different questions. 2 questions that always were there, no matter what we did. 2 questions that were always there were, number 1, what do you want to see in this space? And people said all sorts of stuff. I want there to be a cafe. I want there to be classes where I can, learn how to do my taxes or how to start a business, right? And then the other question was, well, what can you bring to this space? Think about your gifts, your skills, your talent, your professional background. What can you bring to this space? And interestingly, tell me your name. What's your name?
Milena.
Malaya. Interestingly, what happened was those 2 questions, often what people asked for, people also had, right? So there may be 10 people that said, hey, I want to learn how to code, and 1 person who said, oh, I'm a technologist, and I would have no problem once a quarter coming and teaching people how to code, right? So again, it sort of helped us see that as staff, we didn't have to do all the work. We just had to have the space and the training and sort of the friendliness to be able to invite people to come in.
And that's beautiful, but and logistically, was that just via web page?
It was. I would say for the most part, it was just a Google poll.
And then whenever you guys went out to the communities, you guys also had input there.
Yeah. So on an iPad, we had a couple of iPads that we just sort of pass around, and people would give us that. And then of course, for the bird display, we actually had a coloring sheet that kids could just kind of scribble on and stuff, right? And so that was a thing as well.
Really cute. Also, by the way, the state bird for Florida is also a mockingbird.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Thank you. Truly appreciate your presentation. Marcy Washington.
Marcy.
First off, appreciate Memphis still having the mockingbird. It's their state bird. I don't know about Florida keeping it, knowing the history of it, but anyway. When it comes to creating your flexible spaces that allowed for shared experiences,
Yeah.
I truly appreciated seeing that family kind of sitting. I don't know if that was a part of the intentionality of reinforcing shared experiences, so if you can talk a little bit about that. And then in addition, the virtual. I'm curious about, are you guys going to be moving into a virtual environment? And if so, how are you going to create that with those 4 foundations you're going to go with?
Yeah, great questions. The virtual conversations I have since left the organization, and so I don't know where we might go with that. I think what we're seeing right now, I think what sort of came out of the pandemic was the importance of sort of hybrid programming. You know, we recognize that there were lots of people who were coming to those programs that couldn't come otherwise. But in terms of what that looks like virtually, I think that it's an unexplored space. You know, I think there's so much potential there of what that might look like. And interestingly, it would be interesting to sort of bring together designers and librarians to sort of cultivate what that might look like. You know, one of the things that as we were doing the hybrid program, and we worked with the D School at Stanford to do this program called Vote by Design, and it was geared towards first-time voters. And what Vote by Design was sort of designed to do was to get people, first-time voters, to think beyond a political ideology. You know, so like beyond Democrat, Republican. Like, what is your ideal president? Like, what sort of values do they embody? You know, are they empathetic? Are they a take charge person? Are they multilingual? You know, and so you had to sort of put together this list of things like, hey, this is what I want my president to be. And then you were presented with 4 scenarios of climate change sort of disaster, you know, a flood, a fire, an earthquake. And you had to say, like, okay, now that you've sort of created your ideal president, how do you want them to respond to that thing, right? And we took this into, like, every community, like in Memphis. And what we discovered, and this may keep us like, I think the first step before we get to the virtual world, what we discovered is that there were some kids who were doing this from their laptop, and they had a very, very interesting experience. And there were some kids who were doing this from their phone, and it was a much, much different experience, right? So I think within library land, particularly within the urban library context, one thing that I hear a lot, Marcy, is like, oh, I don't have to go to the library. Why do we need libraries anymore? Like, man, doesn't everybody have internet? Doesn't everybody have a computer? And it's like, no, everybody doesn't have internet. Everybody doesn't have a computer. And you will be surprised at how many people who do have internet and who do have a computer don't even know how to use a computer, right? So the idea of sort of digital literacy, I think, is where a lot of the work for us has to happen. So I think before we get to that hybrid space, it's the sort of virtual space is like, okay, we've just got to continue to double down on our digital literacy efforts. And then your other question was around, not virtual, but it was around
Creating the shared experiences and the spaces for more like a family.
Yeah, I think that was hats off to the designers. You know, the folks at Groundswell, I think just did an amazing job there. And what they did was they just came and just sat in the library. They were there for like weeks, and like they didn't talk to anybody. They just sat there and just watched, you know, and just watched. Like, where are people going? What are they doing? How long are they here? It was just sort of just observation. And I think they came away with a lot of details that were just like, okay, like if we just see where people naturally are going in, like what do they just walk just by default? Where do they sit down by default? And that led to, I think, some really interesting design. Yeah. Groundswell Design Group. They are out of, I think they're out of Philadelphia, I believe. Groundswell. Yep. Yep. It's,
And anyone have another comment or question? Up here in the back.
Hello, my name is also Milena. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that a lot of these design principles have been developed within libraries. Have you explored any other public spaces, public schools, parks, anything like that?
I have not given that much thought. I will say that I have been writing. I was writing a book. I've been writing my book out of a rec center, and it's been interesting to see some of the parallels in the sort of the ways that the rec center is set up and the ways that people use that space. Right. Of course, there you've got the financial barrier where generally you've got to pay some money for access. But yeah, it's been interesting sort of watching what's happening in rec spaces. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. No, you're fine. I think I think I attribute that to library leadership. The library leadership director, Keenan McCloy, who's still the library director there, just had always had a incredible vision of what that space could be and what should be. And I think every library should be a place of beauty, particularly the neighborhood branches. But your downtown branch just speaks to your community, right? People who come into your downtown area who may never go to one of your neighborhoods but will start in downtown. Your library is a direct reflection of what else it has to offer, right? And so I think that there has to be some intentionality in your downtown branch and making that, beautiful, and then hopefully making sure that from that you can also do things at the neighborhood level, because that's really where I think a lot of impact happens. Yeah. Environmental sustainability was definitely there. The general contractor took a number of steps to make sure that we could do it as well as possible. You could probably go to their website and learn a little bit more about their approach. It's a Nixon general contractor in Birmingham. It's a black-led firm, and I think they did a really great job on that. Okay. Very nice. Yeah. Well, thank you all.
Yeah, ditto that comment. And, we started a conversation with the director, Ray Baker.
Yes, Dr. Baker.
And it would be great to sort of just, because the Library Council that is based in DC, right?
Mm-hmm.
And many, county city libraries are part of that and sort of privy to this whole kind of conversation about libraries transforming in the whole country. And he was all into it too, very aware of the potentials, and talked about some of, the line of, the students had good questions for him about, where the funds come from and how they are lined up for the next renovations and so on and so forth. But yeah. I feel Miami could benefit tremendously from, and there's some already like signs of it. Like there's this initiative called the UMedia, what was it called? UMedia, that the Lemon City Library had.
Yeah, we saw that. Yeah.
The head librarian there asked for it, knew about the program, got the funds to be assigned to Lemon City Library, and had that happen. I'm sorry? There's a homestead version of it too, but not in all of them apparently. And so, yeah, there's just, I think as engaged folks in our neighborhoods, we don't understand quite all of the dimensions and potentials that a library has. And so I just wanted to maybe, if there are no more questions, just sort of end and ask you to share, if you don't mind, Shamichael, like, what is amazing to me is, well, Shamichael shared a little bit to me of like, well, how do you think of yourself in this world and find these opportunities to just dive in and make differences? And you talked about your father, which was a very touching story, but just the license that you can give students to understand that you're here in the world to find where you make a change potentially. And that the tools that you're given here as architects open paths for you, but they don't constrain you to paths. And so if you can just see yourself in the world observing and understanding, like maybe you're getting opportunities that are just unique because of your particular circumstances, and that tools are for you to find paths. They're not to set you in on something predefined. And that's what schooling is all about. So you are an example of that to me, because when someone asks you, well, are you a librarian? And I love it, he's not a librarian. So anyways, you have your own mic. So and that's just, I think, a beautiful thing to end on for the students, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think you said it as beautiful as I don't know if I can top that. I'll share a story. This closing story. When I was 5 years old, so my father, my parents are just amazing. Two of the most amazing people that I've ever known. When I was 5, my father fell asleep behind the wheel of his car and had an accident that left him paralyzed. He is a quadriplegic. Has no movement in his legs. Can move his arms, but can't move his fingers. And I remember the first time that I saw my father in the hospital. And I just wanted to help. I just wanted to just do a thing. Like, can I help feed you? Can I help bathe you? Can I help put your clothes on, right? And that moment, that single moment, I think, solidified in my life this need to be a servant, to always be looking for the people that want to do for themselves, but might not be able to do for themselves. Just need a little help, little resources, right? My father found some amazing rehabilitation, became an advocate for disability, rights and access. So I think that piece of one, a desire to be a servant, with two, because I was always in the library, I was always curious. I was always asking why. Like 5 whys down. Like, why is this? Why is this? I think that sort of combination of a desire to serve and a desire to ask questions that maybe nobody else is asking has taken me further than anything that could have happened in life. I came from a very small town in Alabama. Never would have imagined that I'd be working in D.C. Never would have imagined that I would have made it to Harvard. Never would have imagined that I would be here giving a lecture in front of you all. I think it's just a curiosity and desire to help. And the communities that you all go in, the communities that you all work, my plea to you is just to work with those people. They have answers. Some of the smartest people I've ever known didn't graduate high school. That you can go sit down with them and they will tell you history. They will tell you how to make it in life. They will tell you how to stretch $1 and make it $50, and I think sort of having that sort of curiosity and an appreciation for people will get you very far. And my hope is, lastly, this idea of the library as a site of encounter is just so important to me. Because I just don't think we have many more spaces where everybody can show up, right? And so the last thing that I would sort of ask of you is, I've been studying this term called capacitance. This guy up in Washington, Tom Atlee, he coined the phrase capacitance. Essentially this ability to sit with complexity, even if an answer it's not there, just to be able to sit with it, to make space for it. And you all are going to go into an increasingly complex world, a divisive world, a mean world in some ways. But I have so much faith in y'all, man. I saw what y'all did when I was at the library. Those of you who were in that class, man, I saw the stuff y'all were creating. And I was like, man, if these folks are in charge, we're going to be all right, man. If these folks are designing the next iteration of libraries and parks, we're going to be all right. We're going to be all right. And I do think that. I hold y'all in such high esteem. And I hope y'all know, man, just how much potential and capacity to make change lies in your hands. You get to take dirt and mold it into something beautiful. So I hope you continue to do that. Thanks.